5 a.m., September 1st, 1996. A fisherman woke up early to catch some bass in the Jamesville Reservoir. That's in upstate New York, just south of Syracuse. As he drove north on Route 91, something caught his eye on the side of the road. A person lying on the ground, face down, alone. It was a woman. She was naked. Her hair was auburn, and she was covered with scratches and bruises. Her pelvic area had a grisly wound. The fisherman ran to a nearby security office to call 911. He returned to stay with the woman before an ambulance arrived. She was rushed to a local hospital and underwent emergency surgery. But her injuries were too traumatic. She died 5 hours after she was found. The autopsy report was 22 pages long. Manner of death, homicide. Carol Ryan, 42, had been violated in an unthinkable way. Someone raped her with an explosive device and detonated it.
The inhumanity, the savagery, the brutality of this is off the charts. I've prosecuted some really, really bad people who did really bad, terrible things, but this, very few times in criminal justice history have I heard of something like this.
Her murder remains unsolved, almost 3 decades later. This is one of the most disturbing homicides in Syracuse history.
What exactly happened here? And was she shot and then she was hacked?
Did they use a chainsaw on her down there?
This was a uniquely horrifying, shocking crime.
My mom was born on 4th of July and she had strawberry blonde hair. And my mom was she was a firecracker in life. She was one hell of a good woman.
Carol Ryan grew up in a very small town called Boylston, New York. She went to school in Sandy Creek, the next town over, and she was a normal kid. Back then, her name was Carol Paul. She had several brothers and sisters, and she loved to sing. She was mentioned in local papers for singing in school concerts, and she was in her school chorus.
My mom is the reason why I love music so much. Music was always played in our home. She liked to go to concerts. She loved dancing. She'd go to the bar, and most of the time at the bar, you wouldn't find her at the bar, you would find her on the dance floor. Our life was all about family. That's what our life was.
Sean never met his father, Clark Hamilton. He was raised by his mom and her mother, Edith.
My mom and my grandmother were very close. My grandmother passed away about 6 months before my mom was killed. She couldn't handle my grandmother's passing very well. She started drinking again. Before you knew it, she had gotten pulled over. She got another DWI. And then it was just kind of downhill from there. We talked all the time. I just always tried to be as supportive as I could. She was really depressed. Like I said, when my gram died, it pretty much stopped the family from being a family.
Carol Ryan was last seen in this driveway entrance to a county compost site. Carl Kruger, the original lead detective on the case in '96, showed us exactly where Carol was found. Because I thought she would have been found, in the grass.
No,
hard to find.
No, she was right on the pavement here, right at the entrance. Like I said, right about here. I was the lead detective initially on the Carol Ryan case when it happened back in 1996. The only thing here was, I remember, some staining, obviously, blood stains, and these red paper fragments that at first didn't make any sense to us.
Right.
We're going, what the heck is this? And then when we start getting word in from the hospital, then we went, oh my God, that's firework fragments,
She was raped. She was raped with an explosion.
Carol had been so badly beaten that first responders struggled to identify her race.
When they got her up to the hospital and we started trying to get as many identifying features as we could, that's when the doctor kind of pried her eyes open and told us what color her eyes were. That's how her eyes were swollen shut, completely shut.
Carol had been living in the village of Eastwood, a residential area in the city limits. She lived alone with her fluffy cat named Bird. Eastwood is charming. It's safe. It's just up the road from downtown Syracuse, but doesn't feel like it's part of a city. There's a small business district with a smattering of bars, shops, and a local theater. Carol was 42 when she was attacked. She was bar hopping around Syracuse, first around downtown, then back in Eastwood. The night she was attacked, Carol was seen around midnight at Dinosaur Barbecue, which is still one of the most popular restaurants in Syracuse. 5 witnesses saw Carol at Dinosaur Barbecue from midnight to about 12:30 a.m. A few minutes later, a witness named Donna Booth saw Carol at the dive bar Pro's Grill, just down the street from Dinosaur Barbecue.
She was just passing through there like everyone else would. They come for a few beers and leave and go somewhere else.
Witnesses saw Carol at Pro's Grill from about 12:30 a.m. to 1:15. Donna said Carol didn't stay long. She had a drink or two, then went on her way back to Eastwood. The next time people see her, it's about 1:30 a.m. at the East Room Bar. The East Room is an 8 to 10 minute drive from Pro's. It's most likely she hitchhiked back to her neighborhood. Carol didn't have a car. Her license was suspended, and after 1 a.m., it's unlikely she caught a bus. The East Room is a neighborhood bar, very close to Carol's Eastwood apartment. 7 witnesses saw Carol there that night from about 1:30 a.m. to closing time, a little bit after 2. We spoke to the bartender who served Carol that night. I know you only saw her for, maybe a couple hours?
Yeah, she was, like I said, she was bubbly. She was playing pool, and there wasn't many of us at the bar, because that's why she was like, who wants to go to breakfast? I'll buy it, and, none of us wanted to go, but she left alone.
And as far as the bartender saw, no one was bothering Carol or following her.
She was new, though. She's never been there before.
After the bar closed, 2 witnesses told police they saw Carol hitchhiking westbound on James Street. That's the main street bringing people from Eastwood back downtown. So this part was weird. It's possible she was trying to get a ride home, but her apartment was only a short walk away. It's more plausible that Carol wanted a ride back downtown to keep her night going, maybe to get breakfast at a 24-hour diner. We don't know her motivations for sure, but we spoke to someone who believes she saw Carol that night. Cindy Charvala gave her statement to police the week after Carol's murder. She lives about 6 minutes from the East Room where Carol was last seen at 2 a.m.
It kind of haunted me because I felt guilty.
Because you didn't get to say anything right away, or why?
No, because I didn't pick this person up that was hitching a ride. From a distance, it looked like a male. And I said, I think it could be a girl.
Unfortunately, the next time anyone sees Carol, other than her killer, is at 6:30 a.m. when she was discovered by the fishermen. After Carol Ryan was rushed to the hospital, police called the county medical examiner's office.
In 1995, I came to Syracuse as deputy chief medical examiner, and in 1996, I met Carol Ryan.
Dr. Mary Jimbelik was 40 when she got the call to examine Carol Ryan. She was 2 years younger than Carol herself.
We were told that, a woman had been found outside, still alive, a lot of blood loss, obvious trauma, possibly a gunshot or a rifle or a shotgun injury, and that she'd undergone life-saving surgery, was still alive, but they wanted some advice on what the etiology of the wound was. What exactly happened here? Because there was so much tissue damage that it defied, a reasonable explanation.
The big obstacle to the investigation was that Carol remained alive. So the priority, rightfully so, had to be saving her, not gathering evidence.
This may sound selfish, but certainly a crime scene that's pristine is certainly going to be more helpful to law enforcement than a crime scene that's been tampered with, or a crime scene in which the victim's been moved. And obviously when she got to the hospital and they're trying to work on many of her injuries, we understand that some of the evidence may have been compromised or actually maybe even lost. It's not criticism, it's just a situation that you're presented with.
Dr. Jimbelek kept detailed records about Carol Ryan in her journals.
Everything that could be recovered at surgery, I'm sure was, However, the goal of a doctor at surgery is to save the life.
With no useful evidence readily available, Dr. Jimbelek's job became twice as important. Carol died that day at the hospital, about 5 hours after she was found. Dr. Jimbelek examined Carol before she died, but also after her death, when her body became an integral part of the crime scene.
She had injuries in her mouth, whether from pressure, whether from punches, around her mouth. I don't know. She had marks on her nipples that we even tried to identify as if they were bite marks. They seemed more like clips, potentially, to me, but she had a lot of scrapes on her arms, on her legs. She had been dragged at some point. She had that kind of injury on her back and her buttocks. And then the blast injuries, which was the major destruction in the pelvic region, with the bones just opened up completely, the bladder destroyed. And then that shock wave that comes from an explosion that injured her lungs, caused some bleeding around there, and then rib fractures on the left and bruising of the ribs on the right could be a separate blow or could be from that injury.
And some odd things stood out to Dr. Jimbelek while she performed Carol's autopsy.
So there was nothing unique in what was in her stomach, but she did have one regurgitated potato in her esophagus, like a little piece of potato with the skin still attached to it.
At the East Room bar, Carol was in high spirits. She was offering to buy breakfast for anyone who would go with her. No one knows what Carol did between 2 and 5:30 a.m. It's possible she hitchhiked to get breakfast at a 24-hour diner.
And I was really hung up on that for a while, thinking that was going to be a really useful piece of information, but I don't know that it ever turned out to be. But
in the end, Dr. Jimbelek gave Carol's cause of death as multiple blunt force injuries. The explosion led to a massive loss of blood, but it was the beating that killed her.
There have been other heinous crimes, but this one really is disturbing on so many levels.
There's a large filing cabinet in the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office. It's full of witness reports, affidavits, lab reports, and hundreds of other documents, all related to this one single case. There's no other cold case in the county sheriff's office with this much evidence, this many documents, from hundreds of interviews. Yet Carol's case remains unsolved. Why? One problem is Carol's system was flushed before her surgery, and that could have washed away key evidence. Another one is the environment.
Part of the problem is that it's an outdoor scene, so they collected as much as they could because it's transient. And plus the elements is degrading DNA, and we really were just coming online with DNA at that time. So this is just one of those cases where I think we were up against it right from the very beginning.
Unquestionably, evidence was difficult to gather. Had she died at the scene, there would have been a much better chance. But The only regret that I have is that we didn't have the technology then that we have now. Had we had that kind of technology back in '96, there's a very good chance we would have been a lot closer to the solution of this case, if not solving it quickly.
But the case wasn't solved, and there are many suspect files in that large filing cabinet at the sheriff's office. After Carol was killed, her neighbors told police she had been having loud fights at home with her ex-boyfriend, a man named Bobby McGee. Did you know her boyfriends at the time at all, Bobby?
Yeah, I knew Bobby McGee. I didn't like him. There was something about him I didn't like.
Bobby was one of the first people police approached as a potential suspect.
He was obviously our first person of interest right off the bat. So we brought him in immediately. I spent 2-3 hours with him. Literally, I think we brought him in at least probably half a dozen times after that to be interviewed. We ended up getting not a rock solid alibi, but enough of an alibi where the spotlight kind of came off him and we went back to the drawing board again.
Going back to the drawing board meant investigating several more persons of interest. One was Carol's ex-husband, Patrick Ryan. He died in 2006. Carol married Patrick in the mid-1970s. They were together for 10 tumultuous years.
Pat Ryan was, he was a pretty brutal man. He liked to put his hands on people. He liked to smack my mom around, and he liked to smack me around a lot. He did this up until I was about 17 years old, until finally that's when I had enough and I moved out of his house and I said, never again. You won't ever touch me again. My mom was 5'4", and my stepfather was 6'2", and weighed 200 pounds or more. But yeah, she didn't just take it, that's for sure.
Carol's boyfriend at the time, a man named Walt Krakowski, was also questioned.
A couple of months before my mom died, she was staying with him a little bit. She told me that some squirrels had gotten into Walter's house. My mom was really upset because Walter used a quarter stick of dynamite to blow one of the squirrels up. 2-3 months later, my mom dies from being blown up too. It really makes you wonder what the hell the cops are doing. Because there's just so many things that don't add up. So many things.
While some investigators called Walter a boyfriend, Carl Kruger said he was more like a friend.
That platonic friend of hers, Walter, we looked at him for a little bit, but he really had no motivation or reason that he would have wanted her dead. They were pretty close. He was very devastated by losing her.
Investigators worked to uncover every piece of evidence for this crime.
Obviously, a full rape kit was done. This was almost like an arson, trying to detect DNA after an arson. Did the person leave a fingerprint? Obviously, in her genital area would be the scene of the rape, and that was destroyed by this monster.
Experts on this case are divided on motive. Some strongly believe the killer had to know Carol, but the DA thinks it's more likely this was a stranger.
I wouldn't necessarily agree that the person had to know Carol. He may have met her that night. In fact, it suggests just the opposite to me. If it was somebody that knew Carol and had planned on killing her, even in a sadistic manner, I don't think it would have been done at that location where detection could be so readily available because of the nature of the traffic there. It seems to me it would have been better planned out. This is just somebody that encountered Carol, in my judgment, that night and just hates women.
That encounter could have been at the East Room Bar, one of the last places Carol was seen alive. Police zeroed in on one man who was at the bar that night. And today, he is still out there.
He was a patron in that bar that night at the same time that Carol was there. And some things came to light in the investigation afterwards that brought a little more spotlight on him. Everybody was asked, what time did you leave the bar? What time did you get home? But I want to say he said he got home around 10 o'clock, but then we got information later that he'd lied about his alibi, and not only he lied, but he had his girlfriend lie to us also when we went to confirm his alibi with her. When we went back to re-interview her, I think she got nervous that she'd lied to the police, and she came clean with us and told us that, yeah, I lied about. He asked me to lie what time he'd gotten home.
This man is still alive. After Carol's murder, he moved out of New York State, and we reached out to him for his side of the story.
Hello, who's this?
Hi, this is Katrina Tulloch. I'm a reporter for the Post-Standard. I'm reaching out to talk about Carol Ryan. Do you have a minute?
No, I got no more to say about that.
Do you just have Hello? This man is not charged with anything, so we're not going to identify him, and we're altering his voice. If this case goes to trial, we don't want to compromise it. Hi, this is Katrina. You just hung up on me. Do you just have a moment? Because I just had a quick question for you.
No, not at all. Them damn sheriffs up there ruined me up there years ago. I couldn't even live up there no more.
Did you know her at all? Hello?
During our initial investigation on September 1st, obviously the news got involved and said that a female victim had been found out near Jamesville Dam. At that point, she was still unidentified during the day. We still didn't know who she was. While he was over to this friend's house of his mother's, it came out on the news, and he made a comment to the friend's mother, hey, I was drinking with her at the East Room last night. Well, how could he make a comment like that when we didn't release a picture of her, we didn't release her name, because we didn't know who she was yet? Is it circumstantial? Obviously. But does it raise the hair on the back of your neck and make you very, very suspicious of somebody? Absolutely.
He remains a person of interest. You know, obviously, if we had beyond a reasonable doubt to make him more than a person of interest, he would have been so by now. We not only spoke to him, you know, he was offered a lie detector test, and he took it.
He took the test, but there is little evidence that polygraph tests can accurately detect lies. They measure heart rate and blood pressure, but that arguably points to anxiety more than truthfulness.
We spoke to him multiple times, you know, up to the point where he requested an attorney, and then obviously those conversations stopped.
Hi, I'm sorry we got cut off. Do you know who killed Carol Ryan?
Did not get cut off. I hung up again. I got nothing to say about it.
Did you do it? Did you kill her?
When a prosecutor indicts somebody for murder and points his finger, there's a responsibility there, you know, that you have the evidence. So if you don't have the evidence, it's unethical to do that.
Carol's only son, Sean, feels frustrated by the lack of progress on his mother's case. It's been 27 years.
They don't talk to me. They don't talk to me. They don't call me.
Alexander Hebert has taken over as the current lead detective on Carol Ryan's case.
He's at the point now where he's hoping for any closure. But I think he's also, you know, a little frustrated and a little kind of set back that there hasn't been an arrest made in this case, you know.
We asked when was the last time he had a conversation with Sean.
When I got assigned the case, I reached out to him. So probably spring of 2021, you know, just let him know that who I am, you know. I'm sure he's probably spoken to several detectives over the years, and he's probably gotten that phone call that new detective assigned to the case.
This is a frustrating thing for Sean. It's a sad reality of cold case work. Rarely will one detective take the lead on a cold case and work it for 30 years. Previous detectives have told Carol's family there's a chance that advancements in DNA technology could break this case open. It used to fill Sean with hope. Not so much anymore.
I just don't understand this. Do you understand? I've been living on this DNA stuff for so long, and there's still nothing.
Cold cases are challenging. Oftentimes for cold cases, many attempts have already been made to obtain additional evidence and information from the evidence. There may be cases back in the 80s and 90s that may never have been tested with current day technology. Those would be worth it if there's sufficient material left behind.
This case, in my judgment, will be solved by one of two ways, either a road to Damascus moment where the killer says, I can't take it anymore, and I've got to tell you that I did it. The chances of that are not very high. Or physical evidence, something that we've overlooked, some new technique involving DNA, and that's what will solve this case.
There might be a sliver of a chance.
In 2022, detectives resubmitted DNA samples from under Carol's fingernails to the Onondaga County Forensic Lab. A few months later, Detective Alex Hebert said no matches were found, but the retesting is not yet complete. There is still a chance that Carol's killer will be found, either with DNA evidence or maybe even a confession.
People confess because ultimately we're social beings. We can't keep secrets, hard as we try. It's not in our nature. And so given enough time, people ultimately talk.
It would be odd to me that it was just a random, I'm gonna do this horrific thing and then never hear from them again. It doesn't make any sense to me based upon my experience.
There are many, many different reasons why people come forward many years later and reveal something that they think is maybe really insignificant, but when we put it together becomes huge, becomes crucial.
Someone that knows something, maybe someone heard someone say something about someone, anything really, to help give some closure for Carol. Even all these years later, for the family, it feels like yesterday.
My mom deserves justice. She deserves answers. My mother needs to be able to rest in peace. I do have hope. Anything at all, I just pray that there's somebody out there that can shine just a little bit of light on this that my family needs for closure. Closure for my mother, because this is what it's about. This is about my mother. This isn't about my feelings. This isn't about how this has impacted me. This is about my mom. This is about Carol Ryan.
I know she's with me. I do.